Wholesalers, it's Rob Shore at Wholesaler Masterminds, and you may be thinking to yourself, Rob, you're thinking, what do you have besides this amazing podcast? And I'm so glad you asked. Wholesaler Masterminds has an assortment of product and services all designed around the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesaling. As an example, we have coaching services designed to help you power wash your practice, whether you have 2 years or 22 years. We'll offer you speaking live engagements at divisional or national sales meetings. Our scheduling service has dedicated professionals trained in the art of getting you more appointments, Wholesaler Mastermind schedulers. Our Speakers Bureau brings you amazing speakers and processes to get better return on investment out of those speakers. And finally, our partnership, our newest partnership with Allego. If you have Allego and want to get the Wholesaler Masterminds channel on your Allego platform, please let us know. Wholesaler Masterminds, happy to bring you this podcast and so much more. Wholesaler Masterminds, the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesaling. Must have been about 6-7 years ago. I was working with a wholesaler on their annual business plan. And this private coaching client kind of put his telephonic foot down, if you will. He said, Rob, I don't want to do an annual plan. I'm like, really? He says, yeah, I do the annual plan. I never look at it. And I know you can relate to that. You may have our annual plan. Hell, it's 17 pages. It forces you to do a deep dive on your business, get dirty in the data, but do you look at it? Do you take action from it? And sometimes our firms ask us to do the annual plan. Do we look at it? Do we take action from it? So it was about that 7-8 years ago that I put together the quarterly success plan, which is what I use with my clients today. And you've probably seen it as a pop-up on the website. It's available to you. And the reason I tell you that story is our guest today takes this humble notion of a quarterly success plan and has ramped it up into something, well, amazing. And we're going to talk about that. Welcome to the only podcast on the planet dedicated to exploring the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesalers and their leaders. This is the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm your host, the founder of Wholesaler Masterminds, Rob Shore. Wholesalers, welcome back to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. Our guest today is Brian Moran. He's president and founder of the 12-Week Year. He's got nearly 30 years of experience as a corporate executive, speaker, entrepreneur, consultant, coach, and he's a New York Times best-selling author. Brian is a recognized expert in the field of leadership and execution. His realization that most people don't lack ideas, but struggle with effective implementation led him to the development of the 12-Week Year, and we're going to learn a lot about it. Brian Moran, welcome to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you.
I appreciate you joining us today. So let's get down to business. What is the 12-Week Year? Let's start there and talk about kind of how this came to be. I guess I want to start there. How did this come to be?
Yeah, great question. So it's interesting because my career has kind of been always management and leadership. I started with UPS back in college and got promoted, and then got in with PepsiCo and joined a consulting firm. And so I had all this background in management and leadership, and I've always been hungry to learn more because I figured as I learned more, it would make me more successful. And so I went out on my own at some point and started to think about, what's the value I'm going to bring to my clients. And Rob, first I thought, well, I'm some ideas and some techniques and strategies and things like that. And I came to realize that that's not really what they needed. That they all have great ideas, they all have resources, they all have access to stuff. The real crux of the matter is how well do you implement. And the difference between the best and the ones that are struggling is all about the implementation. The difference between the people that live the life we're capable of and all the rest of the folks that never quite get there is around execution. So the 12-Week Year is a system and a process that fundamentally helps you execute more effectively. And everything we do at the 12-Week Year is through that lens. How do we help our clients act more consistently on the things that matter most? So that's really how that came to be.
I appreciate that. Let's pick that apart a little bit because our audience always counts on us for stuff that they can take away from the podcast and, if not give deep thought to, start implementing. But I want to talk about this accountability piece. you do this work. You're a coach. I'm a coach. The accountability piece is something so many people ask for, either in their exploration of how to get better with a professional or their own self-exploration. They hold themselves accountable. How does the 12-week year hold people more accountable? That's like really important to me as I read your background and I read about 12-week year.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Now this is a little longer answer.
Yeah, go for it.
Because the reality is most people have a misconception about accountability. I mean, I think it's one of the most misunderstood concepts. And here's why, Rob. Most people in the end equate accountability with consequences, in particular negative consequences, right? Everywhere that word's affiliated society, think about it, right? Bad behavior, poor performance, negative consequence. Whether it's a politician who's done something, we're going to hold them accountable. Whether it's an athlete, we're going to hold them accountable. And every time that word is used, it's followed by punishments, by fines, some form of negative consequence.
That's a great point. I mean, I'm going to hold you accountable, young man. We're going to find out who's accountable for this.
Exactly. And this whole notion of holding others accountable is really, if you peel that back, is really what we're saying is, hey, we're going to create a negative consequence when you don't do what you're supposed to do. That's not accountability. That's consequence. And at the heart of accountability is free will choice. So accountability, for your listeners, if you write this down, it's a game changer. Accountability is not consequences, it's ownership.
Ownership. Let's say that back one more time, because people are driving along or walking the dog or on the treadmill. Accountability, say it back again.
Accountability is not consequences, it's ownership.
Ownership. Got it. Okay.
Because it's based on the fact that we all have choice. We have free will choice. In every situation, you always, always, always have choice. All right? And taking for those choices and the consequences of the choices is really what accountability is. And so when I hear a wholesaler and advisor say, I need someone to hold me accountable, it makes me smile because it's probably the least accountable thing you could say, right?
I'm going to outsource my accountability. Thank you very much.
Exactly. I'm going to take my burden and I'm going to give it to you. And now it's your job to make me successful.
Yes.
Well, that's a great deal if someone jumps on it. And unfortunately, most managers, most coaches, they jump on that because it sounds great, but it's so flawed. And then the relationship is flawed. The only accountability there is self-accountability.
So how does the 12-week year help me become a better owner of my plan, a better owner of my outcomes? How does it help me down that path if we take that thought that you presented us, that
Sure.
that accountability is really about ownership? How does it help me own what I wish to achieve?
Yeah, great question. So think about starting with though the notion of that the fact that I always have choice, right? And just owning that. Because what that means is I'm not a spectator in life. I'm not a victim in life, right? I don't control the circumstances, but I control how I respond, which when you understand accountability, choice, and ownership, it's probably the most empowering concept there is. And then what the 12-week year does, there's a set of disciplines that are built into the 12-week year, 5 disciplines that are the fundamentals of high performance. And so as we take ownership of those disciplines and applying them and building capacity, what happens, Rob, is we act more consistently on the things that matter most. It's not about being perfect. Forget about that. It's just about closing that knowing-doing gap. Right? If people did what they already know, I submit that they'd be in better health, they'd have better relationships, they'd be making more money without learning anything new. That's why our whole focus is execution. Let's just close that gap and be more consistent with the things you know. And what seems like might have a little impact can have a profound impact. I mean, we have average wholesaler, average advisor, too, in the first 12 weeks has 20, 30% bump. I mean, we've got tens of thousands that have had 100, 200, 300, 400% increases. And it's not about, we're not coming in and having them work with different clients or different products or different cases or any of that. They're just really acting on the things that are most important in their business. And the same is true in their personal life, right? I mean, there's the diet fitness industries, just slightly under $100 billion. and yet 63% of Americans, the stats I saw, are overweight or obese. You know, is it really because we need a new Nordic track or we need a new fad diet? I mean, most people could tell you the simple way to get in shape is eat better, exercise more, but they don't do it. It's not a knowing issue, it's a doing issue. So realizing that and taking ownership of my situation where I'm at today, instead of waiting and hoping for something to come along that makes me better, or thinking that the person who's performing better than I do knows something I don't, or has access to resources I don't have access to, or whatever that is, that's the first level of ownership, is owning where I'm currently at and owning what it's going to take to get to where I want to be. So owning where I'm currently at and owning my future. If the future's vague and it's not compelling, then I'm not going to do the heavy lifting.
I want to ask you a question. So one of the things I'm going to impose upon you is that we start to unpack a little bit about the 5 disciplines. We won't have time to cover 5, but I want to give people a flavor for some of what they can expect if they should engage in your program. But before I go there, I asked you how you got here, and you mentioned some of your background, but there seems to be a important piece that it would appear, I could be completely wrong, that gives you some of your beliefs that you have today, and that is that you and your wife are both cancer survivors. So how does that play back into your beliefs around ownership, your beliefs around accountability, your beliefs about, we have everything within us. If we learn nothing new, we can still achieve. How does that amazing experience take you to some of your teachings today?
If you think about that, when you're faced with, and when you're faced with, you really don't know how much time you have. In reality, all of us are faced with that, but it's not maybe as acute as when you're battling a health issue like cancer.
Yeah.
And you, in some cases, the odds are not all that great that, you've got a lot of time left, or, maybe it's 50-50 or whatever it is, right? I mean, it forces you to look at it and think about life a little more deeply and kind of confront the fact that, look, if this were it for me, can I feel like I accomplished what I was capable of? If I were to punch my ticket today, not that I missed out on the future, but if I look back, do I feel like I lived my capability? And so when you start to kind of look at life that way, I think it causes you to be more intentional about, what am I living for? What am I trying to do? What am I capable of? What's the impact I could have in my family, in my business, with my clients, in my community? And am I really living into that, or is that something that's just off in the distance somewhere? Because someday I'm going to run out of tomorrow. And we experienced it. Both our parents are gone, and Judy's dad, my father-in-law, we were packing up his farm. Rob, he had dementia, and he was a collector, and he had all kinds of stuff. So packing up his farm was a nightmare. But I remember reaching under his bed, and I felt this shirt box, and I pull it out, and I open it up, and it's a figurine that's in 100 pieces, and there's a bottle of glue in there. And what happened was, it was a figurine that his wife had given him for their anniversary. And this was years ago. And it broke. And Dad valued it so much, he was going to glue it back together. But he never got around. He kept thinking, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And by the time we packed up his farm, his tomorrows were essentially gone because he had dementia. There was no way he was ever going to put that thing back together. And for me, it's just a poignant example of, at some point we run out of tomorrows, and it's all sooner than we think.
Yeah. So before we start to give the audience a little bit of the 5 disciplines, isn't the 12-week year just something fancy for busting the year up into 4 quarters? I mean, come on, level with me, Brian.
Great question. Because that's what people think, right? They're just, it's semantics. You're calling a quarter 12 weeks.
Well, you're in the financial services community. Of course, we're going to take 12 and divide it by 4.
Absolutely. Here's the difference. In a 90-day segment or quarterly segment, that's still part of an annual environment. And here's the villain for everyone in terms of achieving what they're capable of. This is the Darth Vader, if you will, of living the life you're capable of, is the annual cycle. Because in the annual cycle, throughout most of the year, there's this illusion that there's lots of time. So calendar's going to flip. We're going to roll into January. Everybody's going to be fired up. I've never met anyone that rolls into January and goes, oh, man, this year's going to suck. They're all going, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have my best year ever.
Yeah, it's the nature of the
And
beast.
we're going to get to the end of January, and most people are going to be behind goals. They're going to be behind plan. But nobody's worried.
We got 11 months to go.
Exactly. And that same mindset permeates the year. End of the first quarter, still behind, not happy with that, but still not too worried. I got 3 more quarters. And that, why do we behave differently in November and December? And we behave very differently in November, December than we do July and August.
Because the shot clock's almost out.
Yeah, there's a deadline. Right? There's a line in the sand, a point at which we're going to measure our success or failure. And for most people, that's the end of December. It's an arbitrary deadline at one level, but it has a huge impact.
Do you snub your nose at annual planning?
Annual planning is better than no planning. But there's so many pitfalls with annual planning. One is you can't predict what's going to be happening 6 months from now, let alone 11, 12 months from now.
Right.
So, and because you're trying to plan for 12 months, there's so much in the plan that it's overwhelming from the start, and people go through the year diffused. And so there's a little bit of progress made across a broad spectrum.
Yeah.
And again, it's better than no planning, but, that's a process that dates back some 70, 80, 90 years when you could look out 5, 6, 7 years and not a lot was going to change. We're not in that environment anymore. And yet, most organizations, most wholesalers for that matter, plan the way they did 70, 80 years ago, where it's an annual plan.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's keep our promises. I want to give the folks some of your disciplines. So I'll let you guide me through what you want to talk to us about in terms of the disciplines that build high performance. There were 5 that you alluded to. What would the first one be?
So I'll touch on them. The first is vision. And now here's the thing when I say that. I know people check out because they've heard, I've heard about vision before. But the reality is that's the starting point. That's the why. That's the emotional connection to why you're willing to step out and do things differently and do different things. Because if you're going to create a different result, you're going to have to take different action. And every time you do that, there's uncertainty, there's discomfort, there's anxiety with that. Why am I going to do that? Especially if I'm successful.
Well,
right?
I have to ask the stupid question, though. So, and I'll ask it for audience members that might be thinking it but don't want to say it out loud. Vision of what? Vision of my annual goal? Vision of my product mix? Vision of where I want to get to within the company? Vision of how much money I want to make? Vision of what?
Yes. So here's what we do. Most people that have done any vision work, it's around their business or their department or career. We start with your life.
Okay.
This is part of life. What do you want your life to look like? And we take 2 cuts at it. We do long-term aspirational, 5, 10, 15 years plus into the future, and then we bring it more near-term to 3 years. And what does great look like? Not good. God willing, you're going to be here. Let's make it great. What does that look like for you in every aspect that matters to you, from your health to your relationships to your income to your investments to the car you drive to all that stuff matters. If it matters to you, it becomes part of the vision because that's what matters. And then we work on the business and say, okay, what do you need to do in your business to line and enable that? So Rob, there's this emotional connection between the daily action and the life I want to live long term. When we connect those 2 up, that's incredibly powerful because that's the reason for me to take that action even though I don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the first one is vision. And you're right. It has a woo-woo connotation to it, right?
It does. It does. So we get very practical with it and very, very tangible. And the big thing is not just creating it, but staying connected to it. And there's some cool brain research that talks about neuroplasticity and how you can create new pathways in your brain. But the coolest piece of that research says that, the very neurons that fire when you think about a life of greatness are the same neurons that fire when you act on it. Mm. So that's the power of vision.
All right. So first
really
discipline.
Training your brain to act on it.
Yes.
If the vision's done if it's done effectively.
All right. So first discipline is vision. Second discipline?
12-week planning.
Okay. So the actual 12-week plan.
Yep. So we take that longer-term vision and we bring it near-term. We say, okay, where do we need to be at the end of 12 weeks to be standing that ground? And, 12-week plans have two levels. They have goals, they have tactics. It's a very simple structure. Now, it gets challenging because right out of the gate, we're all about focus. Less is more. One goal is better than two, two is better than three. You start to get more than three in your business. Like if you're a wholesaler and you got more than three goals, unless you have a big team that can help you execute, you're setting yourself up to struggle.
Let me ask you a question. So one of the things I'm thinking about is you talk about the building of this 12-week plan. You talk about one goal is better than three goals, and conquering. I'm extrapolating from what you said. Conquering that one goal leads you to the conquering of the next goal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I've immersed myself in a little bit in terms of how I structure my live presentations is around aggregation of marginal gains. Are you familiar with that?
Not really.
Yeah.
No.
So just because it connects, I believe, and tell me if I'm on the right track here. Aggregation of marginal gains says, think about the compounded growth rate of doing things 1% better. Right? Whether it's negative or positive. If you're in a decline on your business generally doesn't go to crap overnight. It's because you didn't tend to things over the course of 90 days, 180 days, a year, and then you turn around and go, where'd my business go? Conversely, when you improve at 1% clips, they compound on one another. And it that sounds like the outcome, one of many, I'm sure, one of the outcomes of planning with your structure. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. The one thing that's interesting is the compounding effect. One more of the important stuff done this week and one more done the next week and one more done all of a sudden becomes like compound interest. It's not incremental anymore. It's almost exponential.
Okay.
And that's how people are able to accomplish more in 12 weeks than they do in 12 months. I mean, I got a call from a wholesaler last September, and she called me in September 7th. She said, I just got off the phone with my boss because I called him to tell him I hit my annual goal. And she said, I'll probably double it by the end of the year, which she did.
Wow. That
would never happen in an annual environment, even if you went quarterly, because you're going to take that annual goal, you're going to divide it by 4.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing that's really important for your listeners. You need to understand, what do we have control over, our actions or our outcomes?
And is that what you refer to in your book around process control?
No,
that's different. That's different still. Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yep.
But the reality is we control the actions. We don't control the outcomes. The goals are outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get overly fixated on an outcome, it's paralyzing. Because all you control are the actions. But the right actions done consistently can move the numbers exponentially.
It's so funny you talk about that, because when I think about wholesalers, and the classic thing that we all do as wholesalers is that we get up every morning and we look at the daily sales. And if we look at the daily sales and just stay fixated on the daily sales, we take our eye off of all the things we need to do every day to create those daily sales.
Absolutely.
That's what I hear you talking about.
That's it. Yep. So process control is that third discipline. That's tools and events that we insert in the environment so that people aren't just relying on personal discipline. We're going to give them some stuff they can lean on, if you will. So even when they don't feel like working the plan, they work the plan.
Okay.
Then comes the fourth discipline, which is scorekeeping. I mean, measurement is the anchor of reality. It's where we go out to the physical universe and we get feedback on our actions. And so most people are familiar with the terms lead and lag indicators. What are the handful of key measures, KPIs, whatever you call them, whatever your company calls them, that you need to pay attention to throughout the 12 weeks to help you make better decisions, whether that's on your personal goals or whether that's in your business. Now, here's the thing that's key. There's one lead indicator that's the most powerful lead indicator we have, Rob, and most people aren't aware of it.
What is it?
That is a measure of our execution. The most powerful lead indicator we have is a measure of our weekly execution. Because, again, we control the actions, not the outcomes. So with the 12-week year, we're going to track the results through the lead and lag indicators. We're going to score our execution. And that weekly measure is the greatest predictor you have of your future. I mean, think about this. If you want to predict the future, look to your daily action. You want to know what your health is going to be like 3 years from today? Look to your daily actions. You want to know what your relationship is going to be like 3 years from today? Look to your daily actions. You want to know what your income is going to be like 3 years from today? Look to your daily actions, because that's where the future is being created. That's what we can control. So we track the results. We look at the results. We look at that sales report, or we score the execution.
Okay.
And here's the beauty. You don't have to be perfect. What we found with tens of thousands of people on the system is that if you're averaging 80, 85 plus week in and week out, in most cases, you're going to accomplish the 12-week goals.
Awesome. What's the fifth one?
Fifth one's time use.
Time use.
Everything happens in the context of time. So being intentional about your time. Now, what's interesting about that is when I do workshops, I'll ask people, what's the first thing you need to know to be effective with your time? And I'll get answers. Some people will say, well, how much we have, right? And I would argue we all have the same until we check out. People will say, well, how I'm spending it. And these are all great answers, but that's not the first thing. The first thing you need to know in order to be effective with your time is, what do you want?
Yeah.
Rob, that's the vision question.
Yeah.
The next thing you need to know is what matters most. That's the planning question. The next thing you need to know is, are you doing it? That's the process control question. The next thing you need to know is, it producing? That's the scorekeeping. So there's even a sequencing to the disciplines in order to use your time effectively. Otherwise, what happens is, if you're not clear on those, or you don't have those structures in place, we can give you performance time and time blocking, and all you're going to do is get more efficient at the stuff that doesn't matter.
Brian, there's a lot to unpack, and like a great crime drama, we must leave people hanging. We must leave people hanging. If people want to know more about 12-week year, where should they go? Yeah,
I appreciate that. They can get the book at any, Amazon.
We'll have that linked up in the notes. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. 12weekyear.com is our site.
Okay.
And we have a Getting Started course. So if your listeners want to go to 12weekyear.com/getting started, just enter their name and email. They'll get 3 emails from me that'll walk them through vision and planning, process control, scorekeeping, and time use over a few different emails. So it's a great program to get started.
Awesome.
And that's free to your listeners.
Brian, you've been very generous today with your time and explanation of 12-week year. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Really appreciate it.
Wholesalers, come back next time for another episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. You'll find all of our content at wholesalermasterminds.com, and the podcast can be found at iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.